Hello everybody, thanks for joining me again. As you can see, the weather outside is really bad today. I was hoping to film a little bit of an intro to what I was going to discuss today, which is composition. But never mind, I can still carry on with this part of the exercise, which I'm going to go through some of the images that I've filmed over the last year and just have a look at the different compositional components of each image and just see what we find. So we're looking for things like leading lines, rule of thirds, a nice balance in the photograph, and maybe some isolated subjects. But let's see what we find, shall we? So this first photograph is of one of the pontoons leading down to the marina in Brixham, and you can immediately see there's some lovely leading lines that lead you straight into the centre of the photograph, and then the light is producing these fan-like effect of the shadows on the boardwalk. Very nice. So let's have a look at the next image. So this one is in Torquay and it's the bridge over the harbour, and I really wanted to photograph the structure and some of the engineering in this bridge. So I'd focused in, as you can see, on these nuts and bolts, but what you can also see is some lovely leading lines going up here and leading you into the distance. And also there's almost some framing going on the right hand side here. But let's just go back a second. If you just look at the photograph, what you see is firstly this section and then this leading you in to the photograph, and maybe your eye goes to the top of these two structures before being forced back down. Okay, on to the next one. So this is an image of Berryhead Lighthouse. I went there early in the morning, and what I wanted to do was create a leading line up to the light itself. So I got these rocks in the foreground and my intention was to use those as a leading line. But when you look at this photograph, my eye is immediately drawn to this area here with the light and that lovely orange window. However, these rocks here and maybe the light on the grass here just help frame the whole image and make it a bit more balanced. So this is a photograph of Whittingham in the Moor, and although I quite like the photograph, I'm really not quite sure what to make of the composition. There's elements in it that draw your eye. There's these rocks over on the left hand side, and maybe this one on the right, and there's a line going straight through the middle of the photograph here. Is there anything obvious that draws your eye in? There's some slight interest in the foreground here, and I guess your eye is sort of led up and into the distance here. But it's not a very strong image, I don't think. What it does have is the rule of thirds. So sky's in the top third, foreground in the bottom third, and this diagonal line going through the middle. And maybe that's why it works to some extent. Okay, next one. So again, this is again on Dartmoor. I'm just above Coomstone Tall and looking north, but you can see there's a much more obvious leading line. I've used these rocks in the foreground to lead your eye up and into the image, and there's a lovely S-curve that takes your eye into the distance. The only shame with this photograph is that there's no major interest in the middle. There's a bright patch to the to the left, which is a little distracting. It would have been better if the light had just shone into the valley there, and that would have really created a much better image. Okay, back into Brixham with this one, and obviously a leading line up the steps into the distance leads you up there, and then there's a big question mark at the top of what's over the brow of that hill, what's in the distance. Bit of a story in this photograph, maybe you think about how many people have walked up these steps in the past. And this one was a bit of an oddball photograph. It was a rainy day, as you can see, and there was a few puddles in the high street in Brixham. So I decided to see if I could get any reflections, and this is what I've got. And out of all the photographs I've published recently, this is one of the favourites from other people. So standing back and looking to see well what makes it work. I mean, firstly, it's quite a nice black and white image. You can see the reflections of the shops. There's some strong leading lines going through the photograph, and I think the subject is just relevant for today. It's an empty high street, which many of them have been over the last year or so. Okay, so this one taken from the Berry Head area at sunrise. I'm not sure if this works or not. I love the colours on the right hand side here, and I was trying to apply the rule of thirds. So there's the third lines roughly, and I was trying to balance the photograph, and you can see the horizons on the top third. On the right hand side, most of the land mass is on the right hand third. Probably could have filled in a bit more in the bottom third by getting a little bit lower, but it generally works. This one I really like. This is Start Point Lighthouse, and as you can see, I have definitely used the rule of thirds here. The lighthouse is on the right hand side third, the horizon is on the bottom third. Because the sky is really interesting, it sort of fans out into this sort of area, and there doesn't really need to be too much worry about the other two thirds. Maybe the lighthouse keeper's house on the left hand side is on this third here. Generally a nice image. Wow, so this was a bit moody, and no apologies for having made the sky so ominous behind Buckfast Abbey. It just seemed the right thing to do. So there's some obvious leading lines going into the image, and the two ladies walking up the path just there give some interest. I guess your eyes led into the Abbey and maybe to the front here and maybe up to the clock and back. I like the fact that there's people in the image. Maybe you're looking at the time and thinking, well, have they been to a service, or have they just been to the gift shop? Just a bit of a story. So this image, I was trying to do some seascapes, and not sure if this works or not. I quite like the image. Tell me in the comments below why you think this image works. There's not much in it, just some rocks, the sea and a bit of sky. Not much interest in the sky at all, but I find it quite a calming image. There are some leading lines, the rocks going into the distance here, just like that, and I quite like the pastel colours. Again, leave me a comment, tell me why you think that works. Okay, on to something completely different. I've just isolated this one cardinal beacon at Paynton Harbour, and it's just isolated in the middle. There's lots of symmetry in it as well, with the two triangles on the top, and the sort of triangles down here, and it's a mirror image if I just draw a line through the middle. So great symmetry, quite great isolation, and all this space around the outside is left on purpose just to balance and show off that subject. So again, isolating the subject. Here's a tree on the top of Sharp Tor on Dartmoor. Not much to be said. Isolated the tree, silhouetted against the sky, not much interest in the sky at all. I've used the rocks in the foreground just to lead you up to the tree, and just isolated the tree, leaving lots of space around the outside. So here's another technique, using a frame, an obvious one in this case. There was an open door, and when I looked through I could see Paynton Harbour, so there we go. It's just not very square at the top here, but works well to frame the harbour. And the next one, maybe not so obvious. We were at the Dartford Music Festival before COVID, and this young lady was taking photographs and just eyeing up the crowd, and then I could see that I could frame her beneath the leaves of the tree, and there were some shadows down the bottom here which framed the bottom. The only thing I don't like is the microphone stand. Obviously there would have been better without that, but I just like the frame, like the dappled shade, and if you know who you are, let me know and I'll send you the photograph. So this time back on Dartmoor I found this brook, and there were lots of fallen logs littering the brook, but some nice waterfalls. So what I've done is just framed the two falls, just making sure that these logs didn't cross over the middle of the falls, which would have been a disaster. Not an intentional framing shot, but it works. And maybe there's a little bit of a leading line going up here, and maybe even along the logs there. Let's get rid of all that, made a bit of a mess. There we go. So this is another technique I use when filming wildlife mostly. I tend to leave a lot of space in the direction they're travelling or the direction they're looking, and you can see with this the bird's just looking into this empty space, but I feel the photograph's more balanced for that, rather than focusing or cropping in closely on the bird. Same with this one. Although I've zoomed in much closer onto this raven, without the space on the left hand side that he's looking into, I don't think the image would be as balanced. So leaving this space so he can appear to move into it if need be. And on a much smaller scale, this little sulphur beetle, again, he's looking in this direction. So I've given him space to move into it. You can see I've put him on one of the thirds as well. And although there's a few crisscrossing lines, I think that works quite well. Okay, these last three images, I'm going to leave them up to you to decide why they work. This one is a bit more obvious, with the silhouette, the reflections in the water. So is it isolating the subject in the middle? Are there any leading lines? Plenty of space around the outside? Some symmetry maybe as well? You decide. Let me know in the comments below. Wow. So what can I say about this image? I'm not quite sure whether it works or not. There's some things I don't like about it. Maybe the space in the bottom right here. Sorry, bottom left. Quite a lot of space. And although there's a leading line, does it work? Not sure. Not sure. Okay. So lastly, something a little bit different. This shot I took down at Fishcombe Cove, and it's a slow exposure of the waves breaking onto the beach. It was early on the year, and you can see the sandy bottom on the top right, and you can see some seaweed under where the waves are breaking. Now, if I hadn't have told you that, I'm sure you'd have no idea what this photograph was. But why does it work? Because I quite like this image. I quite like the balance. I can't see any leading lines. I can't see a rule of thirds, I don't think. So why does it work? The only thing I can see is this line here, which diagonally goes through the centre of this square image, and maybe that's why it works, and maybe the textures just are pleasing. Let me know. Well, that's it. That's my take on composition for today. It's been an interesting exercise from my point of view to see what techniques I use. I don't tend to think about it when I'm out in the field taking photographs, unless it's obvious. When I'm looking at horizons and taking seascapes, then I might try and get the horizon on either the top or bottom third. And you can see with things like the lighthouse, you know, I consciously decided to put that on the right hand third. But then some other photographs that I take, like that cardinal beacon at Paynton Harbour, then I slap bang in the middle of the photograph, worked the best. And at the end of the day, if it works for you, then give it a go, because all of these rules are here to be broken anyway. Anyway, thanks for joining me. Hope you could take something from that and enjoy the video. Hopefully next week I'll be out in some better weather, and we can take some photographs outside. But until then, cheerio.